Hello everyone, this is Brant, your TA again. This video we're going to be going over Lab 16, talking about fuel authentication. Now, fuel authentication actually is, it's a little bit more complicated than I first anticipated, but this is the lab we have set up for today, so I will try and explain it to the best of my abilities. I was having a lot of problems today with the right setup, so I'm going to give you a solution so that you can do authentication for your apps and you can use Fuel to do so, but it might not be the most correct solution. And if I figure out how to resolve the issues I'm having with Fuel, then of course I will give you all an update on what to do, but for now we're going to have to do it kind of a janky way. So first of all, before we get started, I think there's a JavaScript quiz as of sorry, I'm recording this on Wednesday, April 1st, and then my quiz will be on Thursday, I believe. So this lab is more of a video to give you information. There's no assignment for this lab because I think it would just take you way too long. I've spent about 4 or 5 hours trying to get an example that works for you all. So I don't want you guys to have to do that. So to start with, Fuel has two main authentication packages. It has simple authentication and ORM, which stands for Object Relational Mapper Authentication. The ORM one allows us to use the database to do authentication. So what we will do is set things up so we can use this ORM authentication with a database, and then I'll show you kind of an application that uses this authentication. It's a little bit hacky, but it will work for today. So does not look, oh, there we go. Okay, the lab didn't update at first. Okay, so first thing you need to do is Fuel has these files. Okay, Fuel under packages, under auth, you have this config directory, and then this ORM auth and auth, these two need to be copied. So, you know, for me, I already have them, but you want to copy these ones out of the Fuel packages authentication config. Copy those and go ahead and place them inside your app config. So now you should have an auth and a, let's close this. Okay, so you should have an auth and you should have an ORM auth. And this config file should already be there. But what you need to do is copy those files over and then open this Fuel app config auth.php. And then in here you want to set the driver to ORM auth and set the salt to an empty string. So then go into this config, scroll down, and you should have a packages somewhere. Here we go. So you should find this always load. So I just command F it, but it would always load. And when you first see this, it will be commented out like this. So just uncomment it. Then this packages thing will also be commented out. So uncomment that. Add ORM and auth to the list of packages. And then down here, there's a closing to that array. So you're passing it this like array of items. So make sure that you uncomment line 452, uncomment these packages, and then this closing thing needs to be uncommented as well. And then that will load the authentication packages into the app that you need. Okay. So the source for the example we're going to be using today is located here so that you can see it and play around with it. I'm just going to, because of issues with CSU servers and stuff like that, I'm just hosting this application on my public HTML, but I will show it to you right now. We'll go to authentication example. Go ahead and log out. Okay, so what first thing you need to do with this app is download these files from, sorry, I've got a lot going on here. Download the files from this link and place the controller in the right spot and the views in the right spot like we've done before. And then you should be able to get to it by going to your local HTML. This should be 4444, so I'll edit that before I post the video. And then you got to uncomment this code. So if you go into your Fuel app classes, controller, authentication example, open this up. There's this huge block of code right here. So this create table stuff. So what you need to do is uncomment this code, and then in your app, go to the URL authentication example / create tables. Now mine is empty because this code's commented out. I've already created the tables, but you'll call that, and that should create the database tables in your database. So then if you, I'm going to go into the database right now to show you. RD. Alright, let's see if this gets me in. Alright, so I'll do show tables. And now you can see that I have all these tables: users, user group permissions, user roles. So where the Fuel authentication is super powerful is it has a mechanism for access control, so that certain users who are logged in can only have certain permissions. Now, it's kind of it's not super simple, but this is a really powerful tool. To be honest with you, I don't know the full scope of how to properly use these permissions, but I know that in certain web applications, like for example Canvas, right? There's some people who are teachers and some people who are students, and the teachers are able to change grades and stuff, so you need to have certain permissions set up, right? So the Fuel authentication lets you do that. That's why they create all these tables. So I will just do select star from users. I have one user in here. Now I'm going to do this, select username, password, email from users. So we've got this HMI user. Their password, this isn't actually the password they typed in when they registered. This is what's called a hash of the password. And what that means is when most good websites store your information, they don't store your password in what is called clear text, right? So what they do is they use a mathematical function to generate this string, and then this string substitutes as your password on the backside, so that when you go to log into the app, your password gets converted to this special string, and it's mathematically impossible to go from this back to what your password was, basically. And so as a result, it allows your password to be safe. So even if this database table gets hijacked, it makes it a lot harder for them to figure out what the password of this user is. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this user now. I messed up the command. There we go. So now there's no users in the table. Alright, so I'm going to show you this example. So this example is under my thing because I was having issues hosting it on the CT310 account for some reason. So you can see we've got three things here. We have a login. Now there's no user registered, so this login will fail, right? So if we go back, We also have a log out, and that does nothing because I'm not logged in. We have a register, so here you can register. And then you're logged in, and that's basically all it does. It just remembers the fact that you're logged in. Now I can log out. Now since I created that user, I can go ahead and go here, log in with the same password I used to create it, and well, shoot. Well, let's look here. So I created this user. I just might have typed in something very random for the password. So Brent Robert. All right, well, let's go back and create another user. Brent. Password's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me type it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, log out. Go to log in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what did I use as? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. User is Brant. Okay. Password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, shoot. Anyways, it should work. We can debug it here in a second. I was playing around with it and getting kind of frustrated. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's open up this code. And let's go into explaining all these different things. So let's go ahead and do this. Okay. So you can see that I use the password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so these are both the same, right? So I wonder what's going wrong. So we'll do a debug real quick. Do that. All right. Wonderful. All right, Brent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so now it works. I don't know why, but okay. Cool. Well, okay, let's go ahead and explain this code. So we have an action index, right, like every one of our apps has. So if we go here, we have our index page. We have a login, register, log out. So use the following buttons to text our student. Well, this is not, this message sucks, but okay, so for the index page, I create this homepage view, which is just this little card thing with some buttons. These each take us to our login and log out pages. So when I click this login button, it takes me to the login page, which triggers this. And so if the input's posted, so if they've posted the form, then I do the processing. Otherwise, I just return this login page, which is just this content. Now, all the styling for this is done with Bootstrap because I was getting lazy and didn't want to write CSS, but I didn't want it to look like trash. So Bootstrap's really cool. It's a super lightweight framework that gives you access to all these components. to help you build your website. So if you're like me and you don't feel like writing a lot of style and you want to just get something up quick, it's very good. You can also customize them with your own themes and stuff like that, but that's a topic that maybe we'll have time to go over later in the class. But in my opinion, using these frameworks like Bootstrap are very good because then they allow you to develop a more responsive web page, which I think is really, really important. So anyways, we're at this login page, right? So we haven't posted yet, so we get this. So now if we type in our info, username and our password, it posts. We get the username from the username field, the password from the password field. Click this. Right, okay. So we'll have to do some debugging here in a second, but that's the basic login behavior. So what we do, the main thing is we use this authentication class from Fuel. We use auth login, username, password, and then this either returns true or false. If it's true, we redirect them back to the home page. And if it's false, we flag an alert, and then we have them do it again. So let's go ahead and figure out why this is not working. Do the dump here. Okay. So let's see. That's wonderful. So I think this is, so here's where it gets confusing, right? Orem auth, let's hopefully this is where I was having issues all day today. So here we go. And we'll go to login. Oh god. Okay, well, this is just wonderful. Anyways, what it's supposed to do it's supposed to create a session variable, but it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is do it manually. So what we do is we set session username equal to the username. So what's happening is they log in with their username and password. This auth login thing checks that stuff's in the database for us. It returns true. And what we do is we put their username in a session variable. The session variable remains in existence for as long as the browser window is open, I believe. And then we redirect them back to the home page. Okay, so now if I do it like this, this will definitely work. So, okay. So this is where I was having issues earlier, is that Fuel is supposed to A, set this session variable for you, and B, it's supposed to handle some of the data for you so that you don't have to manually do the session stuff. So I'm manually doing the session stuff because Fuel was not being cooperative. So what's happening is I use this session variable, which is another reserved variable in PHP, and I save their username in the session, and then I redirect them back to the home page. Now when I get here, I need to use session start to be able to access session data. So I session start, I create the home page, but then if the username is set in the session data, then I'm gonna basically flag the logged in alert, and if it's not, I'm gonna flag the not logged in alert. So what I'm doing is I'm saving this little piece of data that basically says this person's logged in, this is what their username is. So then when I go to log out, what I do is I start the session to get access to the data. I set their username to an empty string, and then I destroy all the session data using session destroy. And then I send them back to the home page. So what happens is if I click log out, you're no longer logged in. Okay, so in a perfect world, how this is actually supposed to work is I'm supposed to be able to um, use this auth login. It'll not only set the session data for you, but it'll also save the logged in state. So instead of doing if is set session username, you can just do auth check like this, and it'll deal with checking the authentication. Now, for some reason, this does not work. I'm not sure why. I spent hours trying to figure it out, but for some reason, it has something to do with Fuel, and the documentation isn't very good. So as a result, we're going to do it this other way, and that's why I say it's a little hacky. This is more of a vanilla way of doing it, but it is a way to do it. One of the downsides to this approach is that if you want to have a remember me type functionality, you need to manually deal with the cookies yourself. Cookies is something we'll talk about later on, but for now, we're just going to stick with these single session logons. Okay, now let's look at this register, because the register is kind of pretty gnarly. So let's go in here. So let's register a new user. Running out of email addresses here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so what's happening is, first thing I do is I create this validation object. So the validation is making sure that the username, password, and email are all set, and that the email is a valid email. So I'm adding these validation fields. Then you use validation run. It checks the username, password, and email, makes sure that they're okay. And if not, it does a validation fail. So let's say I didn't put the password in. Missing one or more fields. Okay. So it fails the validation, returns that alert. Okay, so the other option is if the validation passes, we're going to try and create a user using auth. So we do create user, username, password, email, and then I set that session data so that they become quote unquote logged in after they've created their user, and then I redirect them back to the home page. Now, if something fails in this authentication, so let's say I try and create, let's see here. Let's say I try and create another Brant account. Right? So even though this stuff's filled out, it's going to fail because that email address already exists. And so it's going to get heated. All right, so I wonder what happens if we use the same username but a different email. Well, either way, it's creating this error that something is already in the table. So basically, we use this auth create user to create a new user in the database. So let's go ahead and delete from new users. Okay. All right, so it's empty. So let's go ahead and create a user. This logs all the stuff in the table, so now when we go over here, we have a new user entry in our database. So that's kind of how this register works. Now, it seems simple, and it really isn't that bad, but it can get a little bit tricky. So that's why I'm giving you this source code so that you can create a login page for your apps, and so that you have this to look at and see, okay, how did he do it? Now, if you're more interested in how this app works, a lot of stuff is happening in these views, which I'm just going to open so we can look at them. So the views all have an outline. So here's the outline. Basically, the outline loads in all this Bootstrap code and stuff, all the libraries to support this. And then I have a main container. This is all Bootstrap stuff. So Bootstrap uses something called Flexbox, which you can read up on. But it's supposed to deal with some of the responsiveness for you. And it's in a column row structure. So I just created a column at the top for some padding. So this up here is just an empty column, or an empty row, sorry. You can see there's just an empty padded row, and then there's this alert, and then there's our main thing. Okay. So then what I do is if there is an alert, I echo it out on the top. Otherwise, I echo the contents. So in here, what I'm doing is I forge a view. So if I'm doing the home page, I set the contents to home page. If I'm doing the login, I set the contents to login. And if I'm doing a register, I set the contents to register right here. So this makes it possible to have this kind of cool, fresh-looking page. And then these alerts are just little things like this that just get echoed out into this alert spot. They have the alert class, which is a bootstrap thing that gives them the style that they have. So the home page, and then for this home page too, you'll notice this is like a card. So a card is like a little like floating kind of box thing like this. So what this is I use the div class card, and then I have card body and some content in it with some buttons. It's just more of a style thing. Here, we'll look at this login page because this is, I think, the most interesting. So I use Fuel Forms to create this form. And then I use, this is login, but still it's the same thing. So here I've got my login. I've got this form. I'm using Bootstrap, which is this library I'm talking about. So I create a div with form group, a label for that, username, and then a username input, then a password and a password input, and then a submit button. And this does all the stuff for me, so that's very cool. And then I have this JavaScript code here that isn't in my working example, but I'll show you anyways. So let's see, hold on, if this, I don't think it updated properly, so let's go like that. We'll see if it works. So this JavaScript code I have down here checks to see, or it should check to see. Yeah, so it does this for us, right? It does like some front-end validation and says, hey, like you still need to fill out these other fields. So that's pretty useful. Same thing with this register, but it's just got all these form elements. Oh yeah, and this is important. So this form CSRF is a cross-site resource token. So there's a certain type of cyber attack where people can basically cause you to do something you don't intend to do. It's a little complicated to explain, but essentially this cross-site resource token, it'll create a little input that looks like this. So it's a hidden input, but see how it's got this huge number associated with it. So no one could ever guess this number, essentially is the point. And every time you go to this thing, this number changes. So now it's a different number, reload it again. I know it's hard to see, but it's different again. And so what happens is every time you use this, you send this cross-resource token so that someone's not basically hacking your page. And then I forgot to do it on this side, but what you can then do is, for security reasons, you can do this, cross-resource protection. Then what you do is if there's not a valid token, so we could do something like this. So we also want to check the token and make sure it's valid. So basically that they're not sending an old or expired token or something. So that protects us from hackers in a kind of convoluted and difficult to explain manner. But anyways, that's kind of this example I wanted to run through. I know you guys have a lot going on with your quizzes, so I wanted to make this easy as possible for the kind of thing that it is. So now you should be able to, based on this example I'm giving you, you should be able to create your own login pages for your own applications. Okay, so thank you for watching. I hope this is useful information for you. and I hope that you're able to get an app up and running. Again, there's no submission for this lab. And if you guys have any questions, you can always reach me on Slack. I can't promise that I have every answer for this authentication thing, but I can at least try and point you in the right direction. Alright, so thank you so much. I will talk to you guys next week when I post another video.